Okay. So thanks everyone for staying for the last session of the day. Big Ideas for Small Cities. It's part of the Life and Data Research Network. So we've just had a workshop session led by Alan from Product Forge regarding some big ideas from various groups. So what we'd like to do is just maybe invite a little bit of discussion on those. So the top line questions, the actions, and also next steps. So if we could get some spokespeople to maybe talk a little bit about the questions, actions, and next steps from each group, that would be really useful. Who wants to start?
We can start.
Great.
We had a difficult time and got really sort of intellectual about everything, and then at the end. So the question, how might we introduce the idea of, or just data literacy, through art created from data? So you have a piece of art or a public art piece, and this has been created with data. So the activity is to reverse engineer that piece of art. So you invite people to break it down from what it is down to how it was created. So the next steps would just bring together people who can do that or did do that. So developers, designers, artists, lay people. So it's that way of introducing data, getting people turned on about it because they saw something beautiful, and then showing them how it was done by bringing it.
Great. And that sounds great. Any thoughts on that, guys? On that particular take?
There's the piece of artwork that's in the middle of CIA or the Pentagon in the, I don't know what that thing, the atrium, where it's an actual code that nobody's broke yet.
Oh, really? Wow.
Where the idea is it's a piece of art that actually has a code written throughout it.
So you
and
could even
people
just invite people to
work it backwards.
Yeah.
That's what the first thing I thought of when you said it.
Oh,
So
nice.
something that has a message, or that's a cipher, but that goes with what CIA is and how that works, or Pentagon. But you don't have to do it that way.
Yeah.
But something that it's built up.
Because we get a little, well, I got a little bit hung up on the value exchange, right? What is the problem we're solving for people? Why would they be interested in even taking part in this? So maybe there's still something missing there about the value exchange, the exchange for their time, the exchange for getting a team together. Still to figure out, but that'd be kind of a cool, like, treasure hunt, but not type thing.
You could write a whole Dan Brown book about it.
That's true.
Oh, but it would be better.
And a whole augmented reality game maybe that kind of follows a treasure trail around.
Yeah.
It could be global if you really wanted to.
I was in
Scale
the
up.
same group with, and had that same intellectual quagmire struggle. I think the question that Catherine's group came up with was that almighty, really big, unwieldy question that I felt that I couldn't tackle, and that's why I reverted to the whole of, to me, creating, whenever I've really got engaged and excited about data like Fee was, it's like, it's about how it's presented to you in ways that you're like, it's that instant thing. And I know it's gimmicky, and I know but to me, it's all very well for us talking in this room, but actually the idea of data literacy is such a huge issue, task. How do we start? Where do we start? And maybe it is, a start, just something that's so visible that everybody talks about, that as I say, has a reverse engineering, an interactive part, and it just makes people realise that they can, manipulate data on a big, get excited about it in a playground, and that sounds really, but it's like reducing it right down to, but actually, quick fix and gimmicky, but
fun.
Fun. But
It's basically, I think it's basically just bringing the whole question of data literacy down to its very essential components, no? So when we were discussing this, we were talking about the white bridge that connects, that goes over the train rails, that is in the city center, the big one. So what if you if you like that with you do perform a real-time sentiment analysis on Twitter, on the hashtag Sterling, and you like that on, you know, with lights that reflect either the mood of the city. So the interesting bit is then when you say to people, well, this is basically you, real time. This is your data, it's being analyzed, and it's basically is you who are basically just making this bridge red or blue. You know, so that's a very interesting way of connecting the notion of what data enables and what ways you as a citizen are producing data, and then in ways that can actually just be reflected on the city and the way in which the city behaves and the city, you know, reacts to things. So.
And we talked about the kind of, that could be good for buy-in, right? So some of the stuff that happened in Dundee, or even the Makework stuff, people somehow own that because they took part in it or helped to create it. With the caveat that you try not to freak people out by saying, you've taken your data and put it on a bridge or whatever, because people might misinterpret what you're trying to say there. But if you did say you helped create this, do you want to go find out how that happened? And then that's another public engagement activity, is reverse engineering that.
And connects directly the digital realm, which very often people kind of disengage from the real world, and a sense of place. So it gives you a sense of place, sense of connection and emotion as well, really important, I think.
Yep.
Well, we were trying to separate data away from the digital world and say, how do you get representation of data which is not expressed in, it's really building blocks of ones and zeros.
Yep.
And we looked at how could you get a creative process, a creative analog process, and represent that in terms of data. Have somebody come in effectively reverse engineer it and represent it in terms of data. And that's not to put any digital slant on it. So you engage with people, talk about something they recognise and say, yeah, the components of this are bits of data, bits of wood. If you're building a table, you know, bits of wood that can be expressed in, you know, three-dimensional. But that in itself is data. When you build it up, this is a traditional approach to it. See how you use that data, the data being the actual building, the actual wood and nails itself, actually create the table, and say, that's data. Now take it into the digital realm. So that was really what we were trying to do. But as Joe says, you get into a bit of analysis paralysis in this. You know, this is just the start of it. You see how difficult this is to actually put across. But I think there is merit in both doing.
Yeah.
I think so too. So making data tangible, something that people can reach out and touch and feel and know that it's there. Because sometimes it does feel like it's not there, right? It's kind of just in the background somewhere.
Yeah, that's it, this nebulous idea that everything's in the cloud. Well, no, data's it's a very touchy-feely thing. It can't be.
Yeah, a bit like a map or a badge.
I was just thinking that, but I didn't say it. I was like, wouldn't that be great if data was tangible, something you could play with, like a playground? But yeah, I mean, it seems like such a silly thing that we did out there, but, you know, we've published papers with like logistic regressions about what predicts learning and how it relates to, you know, SIMD deprivation and proxy measures of precarity. And I mean, you can do that till you're blue in the face, but I was saying, you know, practically speaking, there's been a crisis over curriculum for excellence because the PISA numbers came out and I was like, oh, Scotland's falling behind. We're teaching our children to be global citizens and now they can't read. And, you know, and it's like, actually, these literacies are powerful for predicting positive general health and future income. And yes, they're mixed up with social class, and it's very complex about how we learn and what goes on, not just in the classroom, but in the household. So it's a really complex conversation, but this is a really simple way to start it. So it's a bit off topic, and it wasn't what our group talked about at all.
It's also, I think it's again to bring, you know, this really difficult notion. We spent a whole year discussing what data literacy means, you know that?
Yeah.
And it's basically bringing it down to its very components, you know, to the things that can actually just easy to connect for people to make sense of it. So
We don't have a token for digital or data literacy on here. That's a huge oversight. So for our next event, so maybe we could create one. Oh, there's our thing. How can we create a token? That would be a really nice thing for a group to do for our next event. A data literacy.
yeah, it's a little filled
Okay.
with ones and zeros.
True, false, black, white.
Or like a little kind of L-shaped node with a D surrounding it. That would be
Oh.
nice.
Maybe we'll have a contest.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, that's a really interesting kind of way of kind of bringing some of those questions to the fore. I noticed that there's some scribbling going on the other side of the table there. So I'm just wondering what's going on there. Is that a work in progress?
I'm just listening to what you're saying and enjoying it.
And then drawing it. Fantastic. So we have a tangible record,
Yeah.
which is great, which will go up on the wall, and we'll tweet that later on.
We're going to invite it to every single workshop that we're going to do.
I do that. I do that.
What is it?
Does anybody from one of the other groups want to bring up the question and the action and the next steps from their discussion?
Not necessarily. We had started off with a very wide question. The one way that we would thought maybe it would be like here in Stirling, and probably other communities where you have kids activities like Kojo and Step of Mine, which is, for example, Kojo in Stirling is in here, and that is nowhere near where the majority of these communities which benefit from it are living. So you would have to move it out from here, get it into their communities, and convince probably the parents or guardians of these kids that it is would benefit them. And they would ask probably the main question, what do we get out of it? So if you then could combine this kind of with free childcare, so after school club, holiday, child provision, free all year round school meals, this kind of thing. So basically that these groups, the parents and guardians, would get some material benefit out of it, but also using these kind of lessons then to create, at least in that the growing up generation, a kind of data literacy, which then comes time, breaks down these boundaries to a certain level. It's quite an utopian.
But it's a challenge that I think reflects some of the traditional challenges that social sciences have identified in kind of relative deprivation, in underachieving, in attainment gap, those kinds of issues that have been identified in relation to education levels in general. But also then, of course, the challenge of, okay, well, yes, it is really important to step out into those communities and to do some outreach work, but then you run the risk, I suppose, of paternalism.
Yes.
So and that then in itself is a problem, because how do you kind of communicate on a language that is perfectly understandable and reasonable, where you're trying to kind of address some of those challenges, right? Does anybody else got any thoughts on that?
Just to clarify, it would be a traveling Kojo, if you like, envisaged, you could go out to community centers or church halls or schools that maybe have been identified as, wanting these skills. And also we talked about the recovery community and, people facing homelessness and joblessness, and it would be such a cool idea. I know it would be a huge endeavor, but it was just our thought.
I throw something in. You'd almost need a feedback loop I think.
Yes.
Because you could be evil with this, and you could promote Scientology. And if there's no feedback loop to say that this has a value. So literacy skills, you're saying feedback to, we actually can use that as a marker to say that there's improvements here. But if you did the same thing with something that wasn't as beneficial to society, you could go in the wrong direction. So the feedback loop stops you from going too far down a path that might lead you in a place that you don't want to be.
Is it like accountability or something?
I don't know, just a way of measuring what you're doing so that you don't have a limited amount of people coming up with an idea and disseminating it, because the world is not done so well from a limited amount of people coming up with an idea and disseminating it.
It's really broader engagement that you're looking for.
So it's a participatory model. Really.
Yeah.
You really need to invest. In my experience with Instagram and actually getting out there, we can talk in terms of, yes, the internet, social media, but there's nothing better than actually going out and talking to people face to face. And that is balked at in a lot of places, but that is the reality of it. It's go and talk to people face to face, put up with their objections, listen to them, and take that back. It's one thing to talk about feedback loops, but the best feedback loop is face to face. Irrespective of what we think in terms of how we promote data literacy, that is one of the real elements that we have to take account of, is to go out and talk to people and talk to the people who have identified. Now that's easier said than done. It costs money, but I actually think it's worth the effort.
It costs money and it requires trust as well.
Yes.
So a lot of these communities that everybody wants to get into are probably fatigued.
I wouldn't be too
Yeah.
dismissive of some of the community right now. I think that there are people within the community whom you can target. You
Oh,
target people to use it.
definitely.
It's, you train the trainers. Right.
Yeah, and work for groups that are there already. But it's that thing about contextualizing and understanding, and we talked about this a bit, what problem are we trying to solve? Especially if this is the first time we've talked to these people, so we don't have their needs yet in our, I guess, design of our program or whatever. But then that's the co-production piece, right? You go and you do that together.
And I guess there's a lot of social sciences data sets that are out there that kind of help us to identify, where we might want to kind of start, where we might want to kind of engage with communities in the first place, right?
And I feel like the whole point of the network leading up to this was to try and operationalize this idea of data empowerment and what it might look like in terms of practical skills and training. So we have an idea of that, sort of in a broader sense, what's needed to meet this UNESCO definition of a data literate, empowered person to, engage with the world in a, but you're absolutely right. We would need to ask communities what they needed and what they wanted. So that would be a really important part of the conversation. I'm not entirely sure would it need money. Again, I keep using the recovery community as an example, but these are people who are crying out for training of any kind. They're desperate, that you look at the computers that are in some of these places, they're so old, there's no laptops, and
I work with people in recovery communities as well, and I think there's an element of stigma and challenging stigma and people doing things for them.
Yeah.
I work with a kind of quite an activist group who are trying to challenge a lot of that, because in recovery doesn't necessarily mean that you're not incapable of doing stuff.
Of learning new skills.
There's a challenge of service providers that want to do it for them, so they create dependency. And then what they do is, right, when somebody tries to break free from that and be in recovery is when they start getting these certain elements of. So I think there's a big problem with services in the notion of recovery, because for the job to exist it needs to be a service, but actually we want to, real recovery is when we get people empowered to not need it, all these things. So that could work for not just alcohol and drugs but mental health and all these other things. So that's to do with money and how it links to the people keeping their jobs and stuff like that.
I mean, you would need the money for staff to, but
I think once you create the model, if, for instance, you can say that data literacy as a means to empower communities is a model that you can franchise. Let's just assume for a second that's the way. Then it's a matter of identifying within specific communities what are the issues that can be, let's say, solved or tackled or approached through that model. So one thing that Greg and I are doing as part of this network is exploring how this network can be also, I don't want to say deployed, but how this network can work in other countries. One of the things that we have explored is potentially Vietnam. In Vietnam, for those of you who know Vietnam, one of the massive issues that Vietnam has is traffic. It's just huge, and this is something that you can easily approach and try to find a solution in terms of planning by using data. So how do you come up with that? So it's basically just, again, empowering communities to understand the data that is available, that probably there is not, that just for them to make better planning. So one of the examples that is happening in Vietnam that I found really interesting is deforestation that farmers have to to undertake because when they plant their crops. So there's a third sector organization that are basically using what they call transitional transition workers. They basically make the science of reforestation accessible to the farmers and help them to understand the data behind that. So that's some sort of idea of having a data champion or a data ambassador. I think is the way forward. And just to kind of quote what Jim tends to say is basically using as some sort of evangelizing model, just to kind of make people realize how important it is to understand the data that is collected about them by local authorities and how that informs planning. And it's basically just democratizing data inside. It's just basically the data inside that many other organizations in society use is basically just also available for them to make their own decisions. So you can then kind of transpose that module into different realms: energy consumption, health, and then you can find different communities and different concerns they have in order just for them to explore the ways in which they can approach or they can solve those issues through data.
This is maybe off topic, but Taiwan's sort of the opposite of that. I went to a big data workshop there for the RSE, and it's really interesting because the government has basically said, we've got dwindling resources, we've got an aging population, we've got, our knowledge is our economy, and so they've just basically said the government priorities is big data, harnessing the data that we have, and investing in health solutions, including medical visualizations and sensors. So, and they've just said that, and it's basically like, everybody will research and work on that, and they want to engage everybody. So in a way, it's like super amazing how far advanced they are with, for instance, their smart campuses are just incredible. Their classrooms are so cool. Like, things work on solar energy, and they click a thing, and the blinds go down, and this goes on, and it's all on sensors. You go into the bathroom, and the lid goes up, and the sink heats up, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. But it's a total opposite of democratizing data, isn't it, really? But it was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah, well, not really off topic. I mean, it's kind of, this is the world that we live in. Well, at least that's the world that they say that we live in. Because it's all connected. But well, as we've seen with various talks today, some people who have businesses don't even have email addresses. So there is an uneven uptake and an uneven adoption. And that is reflected in the uneven understanding of the issues and the technologies, and then the challenges that are involved in having those technologies.
Because I said to them, what about in the smart classroom? They have these app-based things. I said, what if your student doesn't have a smartphone? And they looked at me like I was crazy, because it's about 99.5% smartphone usage. So, I mean, you're quite right. We've got a different...
Yes, but at the same time, of course, you have media refusers who absolutely do not want. It's not just non-use; it's refusal in a conscious way, and you can see why people want to do that. They're resistive to technology for various reasons. So, that's something that we have to be quite mindful of in the classroom, actually, and it's something that I've been trying to take on board this year with my own students. Because we often deal with. Okay, so Google it, look that up, do this, that and the other. And it might be the most simple operation in the world for students to do that and to Snapchat it. which sometimes they do. But at the same time, there are students who just do not want to engage because actually they've made a conscious decision that that's what they're going to do.
Can that not be a liminal thing, though? That's an outsider.
Sure.
You go back, I don't know, 20, 30 years, and you would submit a thesis at university on typewriter. If you didn't want to engage with a typewriter and attempt to handwrite that bastard, they would look at you like you're an idiot and not accept it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't professional enough. You were made to go through and use the technology of the typewriter. I understand that there's maybe a different type of gap when it comes to technology, but it's not an evil tool. It's a tool. It's kind of like, you know, I want to submit my thesis on papyrus, and that might get you through Glasgow School of Art, but it's not going to fly at University of Glasgow because it's been standardized to A4 sheets of paper. And it's because there's a standard of this is what we deem that we need to have. So if you want to operate out with that framework, that's absolutely fine. We just can't engage with this process. But you're making that choice actively. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense.
So if you want to, you know, make your own clothes or whatever decision that you make, that's all possible. It just all has consequences.
Yeah.
And so instead of always going for the least dominating factor, the most minority approach, just kind of go with the majority flow, go forward, and support people who, it's not that they're actively making a decision not to. Support the people who can't for a reason.
Oh, sure.
They can't
Yeah.
afford it,
Well,
which is different than refusing.
That's different
Yeah.
than refusal, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. So this is outright rejection on the basis of whatever grounds that might be ethical, political,
Right.
or financial, whatever. You do have non-users as well, and there are a variety of reasons why people are into non-use of media. A lot of the time it might be access, it might be inclusion, it might be ability, it might be mobility, it might be all sorts of reasons. So yeah, I completely get that, you know, and so it's there are these different components of those particular demographics. I'm quite conscious that we're kind of
Have we covered all the groups?
I think
Is
we
everybody-
haven't
So,
we
thanks.
haven't quite.
We got one.
We've got one left.
Passionate.
So
You got
Two
one?
left.
two left.
Oh,
All right.
really?
Okay. So we can carry this on. So who would like to go next in terms of the question, action, and
I'll go.
next step?
I'll go. I'm excited.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to completely change the entire world. Our question was, how can we tell widely understood stories about a time and place using disparate data? And it's long-winded for the reason that we came up with several different questions. We jammed them all together. But essentially, we wanted to be able to tell, not through art, but through a story, something that can be interacted with by anybody from hopefully a large velocity type of data. So I can't remember example I used, credit card spends from Amazon. There's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, every minute. How can we almost in an immediate way tell a story from the data that's coming through and be interactable by the guy who's standing out there right now, not somebody who's been to school for data literacy or has been grown up in that area. Big long conversations about doing it in a time and place, being able to experience an event, because there is tons of data out there. If you go and look at Google Images, you can pick an event and type it in, and it'll come back with something. You put in a name, it'll come back with a bunch of people. You put in a car, and it's all there. So all these images are there. There's videos there on YouTube. There is so much text. There are so many texts and tweets and Facebook posts and everything that's sitting there. But how do you pull it together to tell a story? So the action we came up with was to invite a community of people to gift all of their digital media data documenting a community event. So something stuck in a place and a time. And our example was like the Sterling Marathon. If we could convince, so if there's 10,000 people that turn up for the event, if we could convince 2,000 of them to just go, here's everything I did today. all my Facebook posts, all my tweets, all my web searches, that one's kind of dodgy, and everything, just everything you do digitally, and we put it into a bucket. And we use that data to come up with a way of being able to connect those disparate pieces of data. And it might take us forever to be able to pull that off, because it's not data that normally sticks itself together. So if it takes us, say, 6 weeks, but we can get a visitable story of what it was like to be at the Sterling Marathon in 2018, that would be kind of cool. But then the next step is to go the next step further and crowdsource a process to reduce the lag time between the media being created and the story being generated. So the idea being that if it took us 6 weeks when we were coming up with ways to stick all this weird stuff together to have something that could be visited, wouldn't it be cool if through time we can get really fast at it? If you could tell the story of Sterling Marathon as it's happening. Almost like when they do that thing for Tea in the Park, BBC does a kind of like a 2-hour recap. These are the awesome things that happened today. And then they kind of go around and everybody got excited about and whatever. It's almost like being able to have a curated event materializing as fast as the media is generated.
Can you not do that before? You could curate it before it starts by encouraging people to use particular hashtags.
You could, but then that has to be, instead of just sharing, they have to take data in a format. So you have to teach the format and then get them to use it. Unless there's a way that you can do that automatically behind the
They
scenes.
did that at the Olympics and Commonwealth Games. They did that.
Did they?
They already did it for London 2012.
And they stitched them all together? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, they already did it.
Oh,
It was-
okay.
but
So
in
I invented
creation-
something that already existed.
The idea of using an event as a catalyst is because the event people come together face to face, so you're using the event as a catalyst.
It would be harder to use a city
It'd be,
as a catalyst.
you want to limit the amount of work you have to do afterwards, so you try and get people to teach them tiny little bits to contribute to that, so then you don't need to do all the manual work after it, because it sounds to me when you're saying that, I'm like, do you want to spend 6 weeks stitching together data when you could have the processes at the start so the data feeds into it?
I don't think I'd want to teach the people though.
No, but you'd have to set
I'd
up
want to teach Facebook and Twitter and image software and video software,
So
because
you
that's
would
what I
run
want
into
to
something
stitch.
like, so when I was coming to this event, it was off Facebook for 6 months, but I got it back again because I lost my dog. It's a long story, but I said I was coming to this, and then you click it and you can check into the event, and it actually creates all the media. So if I was doing the Facebook stories or Facebook stuff, knowing that was this event, it would pull my stuff together based on everything else if you encourage people at the event to do that. So it's there, it's just that
It's
it's
there.
how event organisers and...
But it's not as
use it.
disparate, because if you go to Twitter, there's moments, and it likes to pull things together based on hashtags and events. But it's the
Still
it's
involves
the
a
part
human.
where it starts going across platform that I haven't seen yet. Anyway.
I think it still involves an element of human creation, which is good, because if you teach the machine to do stuff like that, I mean, there's elements it does kind of recognising people in the same place and stuff like that. So my PhD was
Well,
about
but I
events,
mean,
social
the
media, so-
idea behind this is that it is a community event, and it is about people, and it is about the way in which they've experienced that time and
Yeah.
place. And that's quite important, actually, is making that connection, because that then becomes something that could be potentially meaningful across lots of different times and places. So, for a snapshot of an historical document, if you like. So it's kind of like accelerated curation.
Yeah, we did an event in 2015 at UWS, and it was around the ethics and the challenges of archiving community-based stories and data, because this stuff's all in third-party related software and stuff like that. So you can get people really excited about an event and get them to use social media and hashtags and Storify, which is actually shutting down, or Adobe are changing it. But you can create all this data and tell stories with it, and that's brilliant. But what happens is it's all third party, so you go to National Libraries of Scotland and go, look, I've got this amazing archive that we produced around the Commonwealth Games. Did you get permission from people? No, we created all the data and stuff like that, but the library won't touch it because they've got their own challenges around it. But I think there's dialogue here to open up around what does it mean for these third-party software to have all this data that kind of
Yeah.
belongs to us, and what happens when Storify goes like that? Bye.
I-
And then
absolutely.
it takes all away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say technically it is feasible without too much of an effort, and it could be automated from if you plan it properly and set up a site where everything should go. There's not a lot of processing need to be done, but there is the data safety and data personal data
Data
Question.
protection, privacy
Data
issues.
protection.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So that was actually the
Because it is
point
not
we
only
started with,
even
and we
if you get
decided to ignore it.
even if you get the from the data creator, you have to get the permission from everybody in the shot.
Yes.
The taste basically, if the runner, let's say he takes a body cam with him and you have to get the permission from
You get
every
out
single in the shot.
Because when you sign up to do the marathon, then you
Yeah.
could actually tick about all this terms and conditions. You could say,
Yeah, but-
well, do you want your data to be part of that? And actually,
Yeah.
there is rules around media and being able to
Yeah.
media in public spaces and stuff like that. So you can get around it.
Well,
But
each number has a chip in it, and
Yeah, yeah.
there's data points where it clicks around,
Yeah.
and anybody
And
can
also
access
just down
that.
to permissions of photography and stuff like that. You just say that, you know, by taking part in this event, you are then part of this, because you get it folk taken anyway. So there's ways around it. My PhD's in this thing.
I think
PhD on ethics and
Yeah,
social
well,
media.
media-
Okay, we need
media
to have a chat about that.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Anyway.
I think if you want to curate it, actually you are limiting the whole potential of this experience, because if you keep it raw, open, then you enable each one of us as experiencing the event to create our own story. So if I'm
I
not
think it
interested
would
in
be
the marathon,
twofold.
If-
You would want to keep all of it sitting there. You curate to experience. If I'm going to go and revisit Tea in the Park 2013, I don't want to sift through 18,000 hours of video footage that happened over that weekend. But if I get 2 hours, I go, you know what, that band was really cool. Start showing me, and then you blossom out. Much exactly like MakeWorks did. You find a taxonomy that allows you to start with something and explore.
yes, I agree. But
But if you
just
keep
to
it
make
open,
sense-
then
yeah.
people can use, just like MakeWorks,
yes,
give
exactly.
people a way to suck the data out and
So
use it in a
people
different way than you would
might
do.
not be interested in the bands. That's my
Yeah,
point.
if
You know,
you're
they might be
interested
interested
in
on the
search.
mud and
Aye.
what's happening in the mud. So that's if you allow that freedom for people just to explore it the way they
Sandbox.
want, is
Yeah.
much more interesting in terms of what you can produce and the engagement you can actually just generate. Yeah.
My experience though is that we've got a year's worth of Twitter data and almost nobody's wanted to look at it, and you could tie it to the images, to this, to that and the other, but the funding councils, they're not very keen to fund this type of work, and it's hard to get, it comes back to money really, so.
It needs to be on top of something else, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's otherwise it's just like you just collect a bunch of tweets.
Yeah.
I did mine with the Vancouver Olympics, and I got so many tweets before all these tools existed, and I basically gathered everything, and then I was like, great, I've got lots of tweets and no story. But yeah, it's about if you're there as well, then there's an element of you personally being there, and you can almost augment the data around your observations, and then what you've got is something quite rich because you've got the relationship to you being there versus. So it's probably only, I don't know, there's different things. People find data sets useful around events if they were at it because they want to reflect on that event. Otherwise it's out of context. So if you're there observing and seeing your friends doing the marathon and stuff like that, then absolutely there's something there, but that could also have a fallout of if you're going to capture every single bit, maybe it's all in context, and it's like how that's going to be used.
Absolutely right. I'm really, really mindful of time. We have one more group, and if you could summarise what you've discussed in 2 minutes, that would be really handy. I do apologise, but it's kind of just the way that it worked out.
Okay. So we took the kind of academic question first of all, which is how can data literacy enhance understanding the place, and then we threw it out because that doesn't really mean anything to anyone outside of this room. So what can a community learn about themselves if what they didn't know already using data? And that's kind of flipping it back about community in the broadest sense, but I mean we're kind of looking at the idea of the importance of memories, archives, curiosity and pride. So when you go in places like Facebook communities, the things that are really kind of active and popular are the things like remembering old Dundee or remembering old Ayr. And if you were to ever need to use something to get a message out quickly, if something went missing or whatever, like my dog went missing, we used the remembering old Ayr as a starting point to actually get people out, and it got a lot of people coming out and helping stuff. But these are really active communities because there's something in it for the people there. So you meet them on their level. So if it's memories, archives, the curiosity of finding out, reconnecting with people, you've mentioned the, you put people with quick questions up and they start talking about language and stories.
Let's think about the words we used as children. And simple posters like that just stimulate a whole conversation, reams of comments and inputs and storytelling, memories, remembering people, places, times, buildings, photographs pop up, and the old Scots language and how culture has changed. And teaching of language and all sorts of other rich stuff comes out of those simple
So then
posters.
Gillian, who's not here anymore, was looking at, she had already asked the question to talk about how we can use old data to really capitalise on using old data as an existing data to start conversations about cultural artefacts. So I guess I'm going to use Dundee as an example because I live there, but there's a clock in Lochee, and you mentioned the clock, it's like, don't talk about the clock. But that's the starting point, and then all of a sudden you've got people's attention, rather than being the researcher coming in and going, or the educator coming in and going, I'm going to teach you about this stuff, come to my workshop. And recruitment is really hard, but if you can find these spaces with like access to stuff which is data. I mean, these people are like uploading and digitising their photographs and videos and stuff, and they're not thinking about the permissions and who owns what and stuff like that. They're actually putting stuff out there. So there's an element of reconnecting where you live and understanding place and how we can use that as a kind of, I don't know, as a catalyst. And then when it came to sort of like next steps, we kind of used Stirling as an example and around the ideas of places, spaces for artists to be. I know there's this sort of stuff, but like folk have to go to Glasgow or Dundee or Edinburgh because it's kind of in the middle. And then I was really interested in how Paisley 2021's bid took Paisley from a place that was kind of got this negative sort of, it's got the worst shopping centre, it's got the worst high street in the town, and there's loads of poverty and stuff like that. But then Paisley 2021 seemed to manage to tap into that community sense of placemaking and arts and culture on their terms. And I think there's something really interesting in looking at their data sets, because they have data sets around how they did it and how a place like Stirling could learn from that in terms of tapping into its cultural assets. And also what's interesting is Stirling is it's got its tourism, but it kind of lets locals down, whereas Dundee's trying to get its head round what Dundee tourism looks like, whereas it's quite local and quite introverted. So there's kind of interesting lessons in that, and that's probably all we've got at the moment. Does that sound about right?
Well, that's a very rich summary of that. That's great. Yeah, fantastic.
What everybody else is talking about, so it's not adding any more. It kind of just fits in the gaps.
That's a really nice bookend, actually. I think to the discussion. Well, I'd just like to bring this session to a close. Thank you very much, guys, for participating in this. Eddie, do you have anything to add to the discussion to wrap up for the day?
Yes. Great. I think on behalf of Greg and myself, and the Life in Data project, which involves Catherine and Joe, and potentially will involve some of you in the future as well. We would like to thank you all for coming and making this event a success, I think. I would like to also thank Janine and Barry from Codebase to allow us to be here. Fantastic venue. I think you will agree with me. Catherine and Kate from the Glasgow University now, but also the Urban Big Data Centre, which has been fantastic as well. Obviously, Joe and her team at Creative Stirling, thank you for the organisation of a fantastic event. I think it is remarkable. Also the speakers, Gillian, Morven, Lee, and Fee. I would like to also thank Mike, who's always with us, recording and making a record of these events for us to then reflect and to report back from to most of you. And obviously, Alan from Project Forge, thank you for helping us to facilitate a great event as well, and this fantastic discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.